The first step is to stop automating chaos. You need a very clear channel strategy. You need to know which channels are official, which are push, which are pull, which are for listening, and which are for manager support. If that foundation is not in place, hyper-personalization will just make the noise much more efficient.
Hello and welcome to Masters of Comms. I'm Lamar Williams, host of Masters of Comms and head of partnerships at Sociable. In today's episode, we are discussing why everything, everywhere, all at once is not a channel strategy. So as many of you have probably seen all too often, internal comms makes the mistake of activity for strategy. More channels, more messages, more content. Yet employees are still unclear on what matters, where to go, and what to do next. The real problem is not reach, it's role clarity. When every channel tries to do everything, communication becomes noise. Today, we're looking at what a channel strategy actually requires, why purpose matters more than volume, and how personalization can add relevance without simply scaling confusion. To explore that, I'm joined by Collin Noronha, Head of Regional Practices in Internal Communications at Amdocs. Collin, welcome to Masters of Comms.
Thank you, Lamar. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. And before we dive in, could you give us a short introduction into what Amdocs does and your role at the company?
Absolutely, Lamar. I lead regional internal communications at Amdocs for the India and APAC regions. Amdocs as a company helps telecom and media companies run their business. Everything from billing and customer experience to networks and digital services. Now, over the past 16 years, I've worked across organizations like Verizon, Hitachi, and Silicon Valley Bank. A lot of my experience has been in high-stakes environments with change, crisis, and transformation. So I'm really interested in how communication can move from just messaging to actually driving clarity and alignment at scale.
That's fantastic to hear more about that as we go through this episode. So why don't we jump right in to the topic at hand? Because I think this is one of the biggest traps that we see in internal communications today. When communicators speak about having a better channel strategy, what do you think that true channel strategy looks like in internal comms? And why is defining the purpose so foundational?
A true channel strategy is not a list or a stack of tools. It is an ecosystem, right? So it defines what each channel is for, who it serves, the role it plays in the employee journey. Now you need push channels, you need pull channels, you need listening channels, you need interaction channels, and channels where information actually lives. Now, purpose for this is extremely important. Every channel has a job to do. Now, if all the channels are doing the same job, then employees get overloaded, managers get confused, and then start blaming the platform instead of the strategy. So for me, the test is simple. If I send an email with a hook, where do they go next? If they need more information, where does that information live? If they have questions, where do they raise those questions? If managers need additional context to explain it to their teams, where do they go? So every step in that journey should be designed on purpose.
It's really concrete. So I like the distinction you make with setting the purpose or strategy before diving into the channel to receive those comms, because it immediately moves the conversation away from the tools and toward design. But could you also share a real example from your experience where unclear channels significantly undermined communication outcomes?
Absolutely. I'm going to go with two examples to show different sides of a similar issue. The first was a global capability center based in Poland. And in a month, they would send about 40 to 50 emails that would go out to employees. And still, they would get very low engagement from these employees. Now, the issues was not that employees did not want that information. It was that email was the default channel and there were too many emails that were hitting these employees. So they decided to change the strategy and they used the intranet to house information. Now, over a period of 2 months, they'd publish 4 to 5 articles on the internet and not send any emails out. And this reduced the emails sent out to employees to about 7 or 8 a month. And some of these would intentionally push the employees to the internet. Of course, over a period of 2 months, people started responding differently. They received higher engagement, and the internet also received a higher patronage. Now, this journey made sense to them. Now, the second example is around managers. I've seen an organization expect managers to clarify communication without building an ecosystem to support them. So, if managers are expected to help employees make sense of messages, then they need purposeful channels dedicated to them. They need a place to ask questions, get context, and interact with communication or stakeholders. Otherwise, they just become forwarding machines, and that adds to the confusion.
I like those two examples that you have talked about. One is on the employee side, the other is on the management side. And you can see that those examples, that the problem was not a lack of communication, it was a lack of clear roles for communication. My next question would be, how do you think teams can balance governance to reduce noise with creativity and flexibility in messaging?
That's a good question. I don't think governance and creativity are in conflict. I think good governance is what makes useful creativity possible. Governance should define the role of the channel, the ownership, and the rules of the road. Creativity should come through in how we frame the message, how we tell the story, how we build participation, and how we get people interested. So for me, strategy and channel discipline stay firm. Execution stays flexible. A creative hook in an email is great, but when that email takes me next, should still be predictable. Creativity gets attention. Governance makes sure attention turns into clarity.
Wow. Yeah, it's a really useful way to frame it. Creativity gets people in, but structure is what helps them make sense of the message. So, in practice, how should an internal comms team decide what to retire versus what to invest in your opinion?
Good question. And I'm going to start with a very blunt, straight question. What job is this channel doing that nothing else is doing better? If it is duplicating content, competing with another channel, or creating extra work for employees or managers or the comms team, it is probably a retirement candidate. If it has a clear role, whether it is pushing, hosting, listening, or enabling interaction, then it is worth investing in. In the Poland example, the answer was not more email. It was better relationship between the email and the internet. In the manager example, the answer was not tell managers more. It was creating the right supporting space for them. So I would think in terms of the channel roles, not just the channel count.
It's really a good filter because it forces communicators to think about usefulness, not just about habit. So how would you explain the distinction to someone who thinks personalization is merely just a tech feature?
I would say personalization is not a feature. It is a communication design choice. Technology can support it, but comms still owns the strategy. Right now, most personalization in internal communication happens at a role level or a group level. Hyper-personalization is different. It is not just about changing the message for a segment. It is about thinking more carefully about how the message reaches the individual, including channel, timing, format, and framing in a way that feels more relevant and useful. So yes, technology does play a role, but if we talk about it only as a tech feature, we miss the point completely.
This is really where internal communications plays what I would consider an important role in designing and shaping the comm strategy in line with technology, which can be used to really support their strategy, from what I understand, and not just a simple tech tool that would be used to handle the whole conversation by itself. So with that, how do you envision this working in organizations with, let's say, thousands of employees? what would you consider or recommend as the first step that a leader should take?
All right. The first step is not to personalize everything. The first step is to stop automating chaos. You need a very clear channel strategy. You need to know which channels are official, which are push, which are pull, which are for listening, and which are for manager support. If that foundation is not in place, hyper personalization will just make the noise much more efficient. After that, I would start small. Let employees shape preferences for non mandatory communication, maybe around timing or channel or format. Test that in a contained use case. Learn from it, refine it. There is something to design for carefully. Do not rush towards because the technology sounds exciting.
Yeah, so really set the foundation and that strategy beforehand before you dive into something is what I'm hearing. So it's really an important point, I think, on surrounding what you're saying. Scale should not come before clarity. This leads me to another question that I need to ask in the times that we're living today, which is what decisions should humans always own and what can reliably be automated?
Yeah, I think humans should always own strategy, ethics, intent, audience judgment, and source of truth content. So, what this means is that a human needs to decide what the message is, why it matters, what the risks are, where the guardrails are, and what must stay mandatory. Because sensitive issues, escalation, and anything high stakes should always be under human judgment. What can be automated more reliably is delivery support, timing, format, adaptation, reminder sequencing, channel selection within approved boundaries, and summaries or alternate versions based on content that has already been approved. So for me, the principle is simple. Technology can support content delivery, but it cannot replace judgment.
I like the distinction you make with setting the purpose or strategy before diving into the channel to receive these communications. So I'm changing pace a little, but another important point that leaders are looking for is surrounding how we measure our activities. This is always something that leaders are looking to show. They need to prove the ROI of their activities. Measurement is key in any strategy. So, what metrics or indicators would you recommend to measure the impact of a good channel strategy and responsible hyper personalization, as you've mentioned earlier?
Yes, I would look at behavioral metrics as opposed to just vanity metrics. Open rates can tell you something, but they do not tell you enough. I want to know whether employees can recall key information, whether they know where to go, whether they act correctly, and whether pulse surveys show stronger clarity and response. I also pay attention to what employee influencers or employee voice groups tell us because they often pick up friction faster than dashboards do. Let's take the Poland example. The signal was not just fewer emails. It was the noticeable difference in employee behavior and response in that gap of 2 months. It is whether employees are clearer, whether the questions are handled better, and whether the experience feels less noisy and more purposeful. If relevance goes up but trust goes down, then the system has failed.
This is definitely a great reminder of the importance of clear and actionable measurement and not simply visibility. So, do you see hyper personalization as a cultural shift as much as a communication practice? And if so, why? If not, why not?
Yes, absolutely. Because once you move toward hyper personalization, you're not just changing delivery, you're changing the relationship between an employee and the organization. What you're saying is that we respect your attention, we will give you more agency, and we will be transparent about how communication reaches you. That is not just a channel decision, that is cultural. Done well, it makes communication feel more human and more relevant. Done badly, it feels like surveillance dressed up as relevance. This is why I see it as both communications practice and a cultural choice.
3 key points. The first one is a channel strategy is an ecosystem, not just a collection of tools. So each channel needs a clear role in the employee journey. The second one was personalization only works if the communication foundation is clear. Otherwise, organizations simply automate what I would consider confusion. So the real measure of success is clarity, action, and trust, from what I understood. And if communication feels more relevant but less trustworthy, the strategy has really failed and will not work. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that's a good summary. And with hyperpersonalization as well as the right channel strategy, it's always the responsibility of the organization.
Yeah, completely agree. So, Collin, I really want to thank you for being with us today and with me. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you again for being here.
Absolutely, Lamar. It's been a pleasure to be here on the podcast.
Thank you, Collin, for being with us today and participating in this podcast. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you found this conversation valuable, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to Masters of Comms on your favorite podcast platform. Also, if you're interested in participating in Masters of Comms, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you.